Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday night nonfiction post-apocalyptic book club. So we are still working on James Wesley Rawles's book. Now, he does have a fantastic website. I really want to encourage you to go to his website. Hey, Jim, welcome. Let's get you unmuted there. For some reason, I have you muted. Can you unmute? Let's see. I don't know. I'm not getting any noise from you. It's showing you as muted.
There we go.
There you go.
New format. Didn't know where the settings were. Found it.
Okay. So we're continuing on. This is the Tuesday night. James Wesley Rawles, of course, one of the founders of the prepping movement, and his book, How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It. We're working on chapter 9 tonight. And chapter 9 is basically communications and monitoring. So I want to kind of kick it off. I'm going to let Jim have the majority of the show. I want him to tell a little bit about himself, and then we've got some things that we discussed with some questions that were asked last night. One that I gave you some erroneous information on, I need to correct. So I want to fix that. I want to give you just a little bit about why am I interested in this, and then I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to answer 4 of those questions you asked last night that I tried to answer, and he's the expert. Now, Jim is an extra. He is way, way above me. So, and he has far more experience than I do. So the one question that was asked last night is, make sure you get a copy of this. This is your technician grade exam study guide and exam book. And then the next one up is this one and the general exam. So for most of you, I think that's probably as far as we are going to go, is going to be the technician and the technician in general. But I don't want to discourage anybody from going to extra. You know, that's going to be there. So why am I interested in communications and everything else? So let me get to present here, and then I'm going to show you a couple things, then we're going to turn it over to Jim. So share screen. So first off, I want to show you where I worked. And let me see if I can do this here. Nope, that's not it. There we go. So I spent about a third of my military career in this area here. This is called the United States Army Security Agency Field Station Augsburg. So this is a communications intelligence intercept site in Gablingen-Kaserne, Augsburg, Germany. So I started out in 1971 as a 98 Bravo, which is a code breaker. I was replaced by computers in 1973, so they sent me to Russian language school in Monterey, California. Starting in 1974 on, I was a Russian voice intercept operator, and I spent 6 years right down here in this corner, and I'm going to show you a picture of that corner here in just a minute. Now, this is the AN-FLR9. We had 9 of them, worldwide direction-finding antenna. I want to give you a little bit of a scope as to how big that antenna is. This is the parking lot, and these little dots down here are automobiles. Okay, so basically this antenna field was 14 football fields in size. Okay, so then inside of there, the voice intercept bay looked a little bit like La Ferravite, where I worked, looked like this. I thought I had a color picture of it, but I don't. Let me see. Get back to where I am. So we want to go here again. We want to share again. Present, share screen. So where I worked is basically, this is the North Bay, the Russian intercept bay. And so each one of these positions is basically 2 people sitting at 2 VHF intercept radios. So this was all VHF intercept here. So each intercept operator had 2 radios, so we could do duplex intercept at the same time. Got a recorder up here. You've got a spectrum analyzer here. So what we could do is we could take a look at the entire FM spectrum, and when we saw a spike, we could immediately touch that, and then it would automatically tune our top receiver for intercept to that frequency. Then we could do the same thing switch it over to the bottom frequency so that if they were doing duplex operations, we could get both sides of that conversation. So then also at Fuel Station Augsburg, we had, as the antenna showed, an awful lot of HF intercept. So this is HF intercept at Fuel Station Augsburg. And that was about 90% of the, whoops, that's not the one I wanted to show. Doggone. There we go. So, whoops. So share screen. Let me do the present, share screen. And we're going to go here. Yeah, there we go. So this is a teletype intercept position. And this was actually for a multi-channel system. So you can see that there's the complexities of plugging in for multi-channel are unbelievable, but we were doing multi-channel intercept on this station. So that's kind of what I did for 21 years, all against the Soviets. And, that's why I'm interested in what I'm interested in radios and everything else. So let me give you a couple more things I want to share here with you real quick. First is going to be a correction from last night. So I told you that I thought that it was channels 1 through 6 that are the same between GMRS and FRS, and that is not the case. It is actually, there we go. The channels that are shared between GMRS and FRS are these channels right in here, okay? So channels basically 9 through 16 are shared. They have the same restrictions as far as wattage output. They have the same bandwidth, and they have the same frequencies. So those are the 8 channels that are common between FRS and GMRS. Okay, so that's the correction for last night. And with that, Jim, would you tell us a little bit about yourself? What got you into this marvelous radio electronic?
Well, you can kind of see behind me if I move out of the way. Which way? This way here. You'll see there's my electronics bench behind me. There's pieces of radio gear up on that shelf. Kind of got into some old, collecting this old, it's called an FT101 system. You have the main transmitter and receiver, but then you could get all these different pieces to make up this huge station. That's part of the pieces up there. I do not have it all hooked up right now. Anyway, my name is Jim. Call sign is K5KTF. As he said, I am an amateur extra. And so back when I was a kid, I got into electronics early. Dad encouraged it. I had my first soldering iron when I was like 12, which if I move out of the way, if I do it the right way, right back there is my nice Weller soldering station. So as I was growing up, Dad was always kind of a geek. We were like the first family in the neighborhood to have a VCR. In fact, it was a portable VCR with a camera that had an old Vidicon tube in it. Well, at one point, he went and bought 2 CB radios for him and Mom's cars so they could talk while they were cruising around. Nobody had cell phones. We're talking, mid-70s. And they got to talking to people on the radio and stuff. And so he went and bought a President Washington base. It was a CB base station. And put a Starduster antenna up on the roof. It's very recognizable. It had a real long vertical antenna, and then it had 3 elements coming off at about a 45-degree angle. So I helped him put that up. We ran the coax in, and I'd hear him up Friday and Saturday nights, just rag chewing to his buddies, once in a while working some skip. And I thought, man, that was the coolest stuff. Then, of course, like for Christmas, me and my sister would get like the walkie-talkies. I remember my first one was the Space 1999 walkie-talkie. And so we used to play around with those, and me and my buddies would use them. Would go out with BB guns and have a little fun, and we'd coordinate using the radio. My problem was, when I grew up, I was in the Air Force as well. If you ever want to look up something, Lee, look up the group AFTAC. It's AFTAC, Alpha Foxtrot Tango Alpha Charlie. That was my group in the Air Force. Well, I won't go into much on that. But anyway, that was my group. You can read up all about. When I got out, they said you couldn't say anything about any of it to anybody. Now there's wiki pages on it.
Yeah, my equivalent was Air Force Security Service, AFSS.
Right.
So
Well,
they were 208s, 203s, 202s.
Right. Now we had a radio receiver in our rack of computer stuff. It was the TI 980s that we had a receiver so we could pick up WWV to get the time signal so we could synchronize. Anyway, so when I got out of the Air Force, I bought a CB for my car because I knew I'd be driving from Denver back to New England, which is where I was living at the time. Right now I'm in Austin, Texas, about northwest of Austin. And so I got a CB in my car and talked to truckers, the whole way across I-70 back to New England, which, was good. I remember there was one Coors trucker. I was in a little car. It was a little Plymouth Champ. He let me get up on his bumper. For probably 150, 200 miles, my car was in neutral. I was being pulled along by his draft. Anyway, and we talked over the radio. So he said, he'd say, hey, there's some traffic coming up, back off of it. So I'd back off. So when I got back to New England in the late 80s, the CB was going real big with, teenagers and stuff in their cars and some of the older folk as well. And I had many a friend through, over the radio, and we'd hang out and go up to the park or whatever. And my one buddy, he became N1RKK was his call. He went and got his ham radio license. But back then you had to know Morse code. And I tried and tried and tried. I still to this day, I joke around. I'm up to 5 words an hour. Usually they say, 5 words, 5 words a minute, 20 words a minute. I joke. I said, yeah, I'm learning it. I'm up to 5 words an hour. I actually do have here in my thing. This is what's called a paddle. You hook this to your radio, and you would sit here, and one does the dits, one does the dashes. As you can see, there's a lot of dust on it. The spacing between the dits and the das and the words and the letters, it just all mushes together in my brain. I'm not good at languages either.
Jim, Mad Chick is saying that there's a beeping noise coming from you. I'm not hearing it. I'm hearing a whine.
A whine? Let me check my stuff here.
Almost like I think what it is probably a fan on.
Well, I have a computer rack.
Okay.
I'll show you. I have a rack of networking
Gotcha.
over in the corner. So also there's also a fan up on the wall because it does get warm in here. So I do apologize if there is fan.
No problem.
And I have this big microphone here that I 3D printed a little back to it to try to kill any back noise, but I don't know if it's working. Anyway, so I played CB a lot, and I got into the CBs. I mean, I fixed a bunch of CBs for my buddies, shall we say. So, I played with, then I moved to Texas, and there wasn't really much CB work going on down here. I still have them. They're over in the thing. I haven't touched them in a while. But then in 2008, one of my coworkers was K8 LED. And we were talking. I said, man, I'd love to get my ham license, but I just can't learn the Morse code. He goes, well, they just killed the Morse code requirement last year. Well, this was in May. It was the first Saturday of May, 2008. And I went and I looked up, where are they testing? Well, this was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They had tested that morning. Now, again, I've been into electronics since I was a kid. I knew all about frequencies and how radio worked, basically. So I studied up for a month. Basically, you can go get the question pool. It is available online for all 3 of them. I downloaded the question pool. There's 500 and some questions. And I would scroll down through, cover the answer. I would look at the 4 questions, and I'd read the question, and I'd say, okay, I think it's this answer. If I got it wrong, I'd go Google, why do I think it's this, and they're calling it this. And I did that for all 500 plus questions. And come first Saturday of June, because they always tested first Saturday of the month, First Saturday of June 2008, I ran down there and I aced the technician exam, got 100%. I tried for the general, which I hadn't even looked at, and didn't pass. That was fine. So, boom, got my technician license. I won't even say what my original call sign was that they assigned me because it ended in a Y, and I'd be damned if anybody's ever going to call me a Yankee again. So I went and got the K5 KTF, which has relation back to my old CB days because I wanted to get a vanity call sign, which you can do if it's available. And so I was like, well, I went and looked. All my initials, JAK, were all taken in the K5 and N's. I thought, what else is kind of relevant? And I thought, well, back in my CB days, my handle on the CB radio was Kermit the Frog. And I looked and, hey, KTF is available, K5 and N5. And I thought, well, if I ever want to learn it in Morse code, I only want to learn 3 letters. So that's why it's K5, KTF. And I tell people that, and they never forget it's, Kermit the Frog.
I'll never forget it now.
Right, exactly. So I went and got that. Well, I came home. I was all excited. My son, who was 15, 16 at the time, he was like, well, what do you do with it? And I said, well, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. I was telling him about talking around the world and talking locally, and he was kind of like, whatever. And one thing that got his attention was fox hunting. What we call fox hunting is somebody will take a little tiny transceiver, probably something about the size of this with a little antenna sticking out, and they'll go hide it somewhere. And it's very low power. It's meant to be a challenge. And people have handheld directional antennas and little HTs, which mine are not here. They're still out in the truck from this weekend. They will go and try to find the hidden transmitter. And it's a little fun contest. There you go. He's got an HT right there. And so, guys are actually doing, there's about 3 guys now in the Williamson County area, Williamson and Travis, that they will go and hide the fox, and people go and hunt them down. So he heard about that, and he got real excited. So he started studying up. And in September of 2008, he says, Dad, I want to go test. I said, okay, let's go. So he went down, and I had been brushing up on my general. So we went down, we tested. He got his technician. He is a KE5 Whiny Hiney Boy, WHB. And I got my general. So life was good. We played. We'd go work like foot races, bike races, where you'd go and sit and you watch the course, make sure nothing's going on. If somebody falls, you can call in and get some help. Serve your community that way. I'd do sag wagon, which is I'd drive around in my truck for bike races. I'd drive a certain section of the course, and if somebody has a flat, sometimes we'll have spare tubes. We'll have the little canisters of CO2 for air, to help pump them back up. If needed, and they're cramping up real bad, they hop in the truck, and we give them a ride back to a rest stop. So me and the wife ended up, she got tired of me going off and having fun. If you can't beat them, join them. She went, it took her 3 tries. She's blonde in hair color. She's way out of way, so I'm not scared of her. Her aim sucks. It's hard anyway. If she was standing right here, I'd say it too. We've been together 21 years. She knows me better. Anyway, so she went and got hers. But so we were going along. Well, my stepson wanted to get his then. And so we were holding free classes over here at the hospital, and I was taking him every Sunday. Now, by this time, this was a year and a half later. I'd been a general sitting here. I'd be working at my desk, playing on the radio, and I'd be like tuning around, and I'd hear a good conversation. I'd want to jump in on it, and I'd look over and it's like, darn it, it's up in the extra portion. I can't talk up there, because if you were to look at the bands, and I happen to have, and I keep these cheat sheets handy, even though I should know them well. It's like this. If I can get it to show up here. There you go. It shows who can talk on what part of each band. And there's 2 different kinds. Here's the Kenwood one. Let's see. This is for the HF. So this will show you, the different colors for the different classes, tech, general, and extra. And so I got tired of hearing good conversation that I couldn't get into. Well, my stepson was going for classes, and I knew all the instructors and the VEs, the tester, the guys who administer the test. And on the next to the last class, the one guy come up, the organizer of the classes. He says, "Hey, Jim, he says, we're testing next weekend." I says, "Yeah, I know." He goes, "You're taking your extra." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "You're taking your extra." So he kind of threw down the gauntlet at me. So I crammed all week on the extra. Wasn't easy, but that next Sunday, the liaison, the guy who walks around interfacing between the VEs and the people taking the test, which is what I am now. That's how I met Lee. He come walking back to me and he goes, "When I took my extra 2 years ago in Plano," he says, "I missed 3," and he turned my paper around and had 2 marks. Well, it's all ABCD. You don't know. They say, "Oh, which question I missed?" We can't. We could tell you if we wanted to look it up, but then everybody, so we just don't. We say, "Nah, we don't give them." But I looked at him and I said, "I know which 2 questions I missed." And he goes, "How?" And I said, "There was two questions on Smith charts, and to this day I still can't read a Smith chart." So I knew which 2 I missed. Anyway, but that got me into the ham radio stuff. Working. Yeah, there you go. There's the band that's freely available. You can go to ARRL's website and get it. So I got into the ham radio stuff, and then one of my big things I like playing with in the hobby and service is antennas. I've always been fascinated by antennas. I build my own antennas.
Yeah, I told them about your 10-meter that you showed Thursday night.
The 10, well, that was a 6-meter loop,
Was
but
it 6 meter?
I made a 10-meter for my wife because she's allowed to run 10 meters being a technician. You're allowed 10-meter, the 28.3 to 28.500 upper sideband only. And I traded a buddy of mine some gear for a 10-meter mobile rig that she could run because after field day, she got reignited in wanting to play. So, but no, like my 2 main big antennas out back, which the ice storm took down and I need to fix them to get back up. One is an 80-meter horizontal loop, which is 267 feet of wire in a big square, up about 35, 40 feet. And then hanging inside that is a 20-meter loop, which is about 67 feet of wire. The 80-meter loop was my first HF antenna. With an antenna tuner or a matchbox, you can work 80 meters, which is 3.8, and all the bands higher, so all the way up to 10 meters. You just have to, work the tuner. A loop will allow you to do that. Well, most of the time I found out after a couple of years, I'm playing mainly on 20 meters and 15, and it takes the tuner a long time when you get up there. You hit the auto-tune button, and it takes a while for it to tune up and match it. So I thought, you know what, let me try building a 20-meter loop, and I hung it inside concentrically. That worked great on 20, 15, 10. I've even tuned it up on 6. So, but I love playing with the antennas. What's that?
Well, Holly has a question, or said down below. Sorry, let me see. She says, "No, little known prepper. I don't think I'd ever be able to pass the exam. It sounds complicated. This is got the tests in it,
Yep.
with all the answers. So,
and again, you can go download the question pools, all of them. You can download them, look them over, research them. That's what I did. I just went from that. The books are good. For study guides, there's also a couple of online websites. Like one is Ham Test Online. I keep seeing pop up on my Facebook. There's another one. But if you just search for Ham Study Guide Online, some of them I think there's one of them that's like 20 or 30 bucks. But how they work it is they keep giving you the questions, and the ones you get right, they put aside. The ones you get wrong, it can automatically figure out where you need to study a little more, and help you learn it that way. Where the areas you're having problems with. Again, my wife, not technical at all, although she should have learned all this by osmosis, just living with me. It took her 3 tries. She went through a class, which the classes are usually like 3 or 4 hours a day for once a week for 8 weeks. So I was taking her through the classes, and of course, the instructors in the classes were they were engineering, degreed engineers and yada yada, so they were probably a bit boring, and they weren't talking to normal people. They were talking to other engineers, is how they were presenting. So she didn't catch a lot of it, but I helped her out with it. Well, she tested at the end of the class, the last day, and didn't make it. Well, she studied up some more, and we used to have a convention here in Austin every year called Austin Summerfest, and they would do testing there. And she says, I'm going to test again. Okay. So she went and tested, and I'm walking around the convention, and she calls me and says, I need another $15. I didn't make it. I want to take it again. Okay, fine. Well, if you retake the test, you will get a different booklet. So you'll get, more than likely, different questions. Questions you may actually remember.
Take care, Holly.
What's that?
Holly has to leave. They got a tornado and bad storm in her area, so she's afraid she's going to lose power.
Where's the tornado?
Holly, I believe, is in New Jersey.
Oh my. I don't have my GR level 3 radar up, or I'd go look. That's another thing I'm big into with the ham radio stuff is weather. I'm a serious weather geek. I have my own weather station here. I almost got my own weather radar, but I turned that down, and I didn't have a place to put it up. Anyway, but yeah, I almost got my own weather radar. That would have been cool. But I'm a serious weather geek. When we do have severe storms through Austin in the area, we light up what's called Skywarn nets. Skywarn is a program through the National Weather Service, where if the county we're in gets a warning, thunderstorm, flood, tornado, any kind of warnings, we will automatically initiate a Skywarn radio net. It's where we'll get on one repeater frequency. Somebody becomes net control, like the traffic cop, and they will take reports from anybody in the area. Like if they see the severe criteria that National Weather Service puts out is like usually hail of any size. Usually they'll say like quarter size or larger, but most of the time they'll say any size hail. Rain 2 inches an hour or more. Winds over, I want to say it's like 45 or 47 miles an hour if you can guesstimate that. Different severe criteria. We'll take those reports. Usually, as we're taking the reports, I'll write it in my log. I also have a login to the National Weather Service chat room. They use Slack. And so when I take a report, I'll immediately post it to Slack. Well, all the National Weather Service people will see that. All the local meteorologists will see that. All the emergency managers in the area are logged in, will see it. So when I put it once, all these different people get to see it. There was a time I put in a report of hail. I was out at the front door with my HT, and I put a report in from hail, and we had the local TV news on. They had a scroll going across the bottom of the different stuff. And it wasn't a minute after I put my hail report in, Cedar Park, Texas reports, such and such size hail. It's like, they're listening. They listen to us. The county emergency management listens to us, because we are the eyes and the boots on the ground to give them, our National Weather Service is about, how far is New Braunfels from here? It's what, 100 miles, 150 miles?
I don't think it's that far.
It's way down on the south side.
It's about an hour, so it's probably about 60, 75 miles.
Yeah. So their radar is way down there. And that's all they can see is their radar. Well, their radar beam over my house is at 4,000 feet. There's another radar system over east of me in a town called Granger. It's run by the Fort Hood guys. It's closer, so its radar beam is only 2,000 feet over me. Well, the National Weather Service, they see their radar, and there's a lot of products that come out of the radar. And I'm going to be teaching a GR Level 3 class on how to read the GR Level 3 radar software. But they still only see the radar. It's us on the ground getting reports in saying this road is flooding. This is happening here. As soon as I say, 1431 at such and such crossing is flooding, the emergency managers see that, and so they'll dispatch their crews out to go block the roads off. The National Weather Service hears that, so they can verify what they're seeing on their radar versus what we're reporting. We had a hell of a hailstorm a few months ago that came down. It came east and then down the main interstate, which right through the town where all the auto dealerships are, because it was dropping huge. We're talking softball size hail.
That's the one that totaled my Kia.
There you go. So I was on the radio taking reports, And, so say as it was coming east, I would, the next report that's showing where the storm was furthest east, that'd say, okay, we're getting baseball sized hail here in Liberty Hill. I'd post that to the chat. Then once it got into like Georgetown, okay, I'm posting that it hit Georgetown. Then as it starts coming down the interstate, which was all real high population, like when it got to the next big intersection or the next big exit on the interstate, I would post that one. People are saying, okay, we're getting golf balls further back up the thing. Okay, well, that's fine. We already know that's come through. What they want to know is how is that storm advancing down the highway? And so I was giving that to them. We got kudos from National Weather Service, from the emergency managers, from the county. Um, they know they can rely on us to give them, the eyes in the sky that they can't see. So, if they need to do something, they'll jump in and they will do it.
Let me break in here and welcome a whole bunch of people. I probably should have done this a while ago.
Okay.
Pepper for the Ages, welcome. Good to see you. Butch Graves, my favorite Coloradoan. Little Lone Prepper, welcome. Good to see you. Sue Me, my favorite Canadian. One of my favorite Canadians for sure. Diana too, welcome. Let me see. Little Lone Prepper, I said. Holly Ivans, unfortunately, she left us. She's got storms in her area. Magic Acres, good evening. Good to see you as well. Theoxerus, gosh, I love Theoxerus and his comments. Let me see. Tammy Harder, welcome. Chief Tech 86, welcome. Muskoka Oma. Who else do we have here? Gosh, I think I said Magic Acres. East Tennessee Preparedness, Jim. I understand you're just listening in. You've got the boys with you. That's great. I know you had a break. You've been working nights, and that's great that you can do that. Let me see what else we got here. And then I want to go through some radios for you real quick. When I was talking with Jim on the phone earlier today, we had a discussion about the importance of, it's not just ham, but the overall package of communications. It's shenanigans. There's another one. Good to see you as well, Tammy Harder. Laura Mannion, welcome. From Washington, wow. Yeah, my family's in New Jersey as well. I've got, my daughter moved there about 1.5 years ago. And
I roll my eyes because I was originally born just east of Pittsburgh, so I was a Steelers
really?
fan for a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I got smart and moved down here because I'd rather sweat than freeze.
So now CB, when I got into CB, it had 23 channels. Now CB's got 40 channels. Okay.
Right.
So and Jim's going to give you a story about CB here in just a minute, and the importance, overall importance in a post-apocalyptic world, in a disaster area, or whatever we want to talk with. Then I have, so the radios I told you about last night, the 10 that I got for $105, now they're $180. It's called Retevis, but those are GMRS, 10 of them for $180, each one with its own charging station. So I can have 5 charging on my solar system here, and the other 5 out to the neighborhood who are doing any kind of coordination there. Baofeng also makes a GMRS radio. So this is the Baofeng GMRS, and there's no programming or anything to it. You just turn it on. So you just turn it on, and it's only got the 40 channels. Bang, you're going to go to it. Same thing with the CB radio. Now, when you talk about either Yaesu or Baofeng, you're going to have to program these. So that's the importance of those of you. Somebody said, nobody's going to be listening or checking for licenses in a post-apocalyptic world. That's true, but you want to make sure your radio is working before that happens and not after. So I was talking to somebody just 6 months ago. They did not know. They still had their Baofeng in the box. Did not know that you have to program that. You have to find out the repeater and offset frequencies for your local area. And somebody asked a question last night about, is there a statewide repeater system? And I told them, Jim, the only one I'm aware of that's a statewide communication repeater system is California.
Yeah, there is a large statewide in California, which I know the guys who set up most of those. They migrated here to Texas. There are what we do a lot of now is when we build our own repeaters. we set them up to use the All-Star Link network over the internet. Now, yes, if the internet goes down, we're going to be our own little islands everywhere. Some of these guys, though, they have RF linking. So, like the 900 system, which, let's see, they were chatting on here right before I came on. That was actually my APRS packet recording system. Anyway, there's a 900 system that 900 megahertz that we can use. And Tom, the guy who set up most of those, he has RF to RF linking. So if the internet goes down, they're still linked together. Yeah, and everything is usable at some point. These are all tools in the toolbox. Not one tool. One tool maybe can do a lot more, but they're all important.
So even if you can't transmit, make sure you have a good HF receiver. This is an 8-band receiver, and it also has NOAA, which is the weather.
Yep.
And so I don't think we'll have weather in a post-apocalyptic world, but you'll be able to listen to the hams on the different.
Whether somebody's transmitting, what's going on, is maybe a different story.
Yep. So this is my emergency radio. This one's solar powered, battery powered, you name it. It's an 8-band as well. It's got a crank, so you can also charge batteries with it. You can charge your cell phone if that's working. But one of the things I want to reiterate, it's very, very important. Make sure, I told you last night, you're not going to use as much battery listening as you will transmitting. You're going to go through batteries when you transmit like you would not believe. So make sure you have a charger and some way of charging those batteries when you, and I'm going to use my Goal Zero solar system. There you go. So there have been times when Aries has been out when they have gone through cases of AA batteries, because almost all these systems are 12-volt systems. So you're going to find out that AA batteries are your best friend.
Right, and in a statewide emergency where the state calls us up and we would say deploy with other state agencies, they will have pallets of AA batteries, because most of the agencies and us find when you get an HT, a lot of them will have an optional battery pack that you can put AA's in and use on your HT or on your radios. Because if you get deployed out somewhere to help out, they will have pallets of AA's that they will just give you a whole case of here, and if it's going to be for a while. So just FYI.
So batteries are going to be your best friend for radios and everything else. So even if just listening, you're going to need this because it's got the solar and the crank, so you can listen in on whatever's going on.
You were saying about CB.
Yeah.
So I told Lee back, it was Hurricane, was it Harvey or Ike? It was one of the big hurricanes that came into Houston. I think it was Harvey, that flooded. Houston floods. It's right there at sea level, and there's a lot of stuff going on down there on flatlands and the bayous and stuff. And so it floods. You get a little tropical storm blow in, and it'll flood. Where I'm at, we're about 200 miles or so in from the coast, and I'm at 1,100 feet. So if I flood here, Noah better be bringing the boat. Anyway, but down there, they had the big flooding going on, and so there was a lot of agencies down there, and they, once things calmed down, they were trying to get supplies in, and somebody realized, hey, all these truckers are coming in with supplies. We have no way to talk to them. So somebody went and they scrounged up a CB radio, a CB antenna, threw some coax together, and they set up a little, impromptu CB base station so that they could direct truckers. Okay, they're bringing in water. Water needs to go over here. They're bringing in food. That needs to go over to the Baptist Men's Kitchen. They could start telling the truck, because the truckers were backing up on the interstate, because we don't know where to go. And they don't have, some of them have ham radio. I've talked to some. But most of them have, they're on channel 19. Well, we need some way to talk to them. And so CB is useful. Again, it's another tool in the toolbox. Some of them use FRS or GMRS. Some have their ham license. So everything is useful, when it comes time when it's needed. Definitely.
So if somebody wanted to get in, and let's say that the grid has gone down, okay, and the worst possible thing, a CME, EMP, whatever, nuclear attack, you name it,
I
whatever.
laugh at EMPs because the only way EMPs happen is from a nuke.
So we'll pick your
Yeah,
event,
yeah.
let's call it.
Your event of choice.
And so if you were somebody who wanted to just accomplish two things, number one, listen in and find out what is going on in the US. Okay. And then objective number two is communicate with your neighbors so that you can set up sort of a mutual, almost like a Facebook page, but do it over the radio on how you can communicate, cooperate, uh, figure out guard schedules and cooking schedules and everything else. So given those two situations, what would you recommend for number one, understanding what's going on, number two, communicating with your friends?
Okay, well, there are a lot of ham radios that they allow you to transmit on the ham bands, but they will also receive um, way other bands. The one I have here, it allows me, if I was to dial up the 160 meter band, that's 1.8 to 2.0 megahertz, but it will allow me to tune on down past 1.8. I can. That's the AM broadcast band.
Yeah.
So, AM broadcast would be a good source because somebody's going to try to keep their stations up. Hopefully, um, there might get some pirate stations out there. Somebody sets up a cheap AM transmitter just to put out information that they can do. If it's worst case scenario SHTF, um, you know, people are going to do what they're going to do, and maybe I could set up something here if I needed to. As far as talking to my neighbors, I've been here since 2007, been the ham since 2008, put up all these in my antenna farm. I did have one neighbor as they were walking up the street, we were talking, and they said, with all those antennas, can you listen in on my cordless phone? I'm like, I could, but I got way better things to do. And we
Yeah.
didn't. So, having the capability and knowing how to use it, that's the thing. Like you said, the guy bought a radio and left it in the box. Well, that's why I like to play with Aries, which is Amateur Radio Emergency Service. When we do bike and foot races, get out there and, I have to tune my radios to the frequencies they're going to be using. So it gives me practice on tuning it, gives me practice on using it. We had an event one time, and this guy, had a brand new HT, and he goes, well, I got it all programmed up. He manually programmed it. You can get software that if you get the cables, and I'm trying to get it without knocking everything down here. So you would have a cable like this that would plug into the side of the radio, and it's USB, and you use the software to program your radio. It's like filling out a spreadsheet, input frequency, output frequency, tone, name, whatever you want. Once you get it all filled out, you say, write that to the radio, and it sends it over and programs it all up. Makes it easier than trying to figure out on the keypad. But it's still good to know how to do it on the keypad, because if you're out in a situation, you don't have your computer, and you need to change frequency, it's good to know how to do it.
So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is take a look at your band plan in your area, because not only is there what he's talking about when he talks about offset and tone and everything else, he's talking about using the repeaters. So
Right.
if the repeaters go down and you have to because you're transmitting on one frequency and receiving on another when you're using the handy talkie, the HT, okay? If the repeater goes down, there are certain frequencies that are specifically allocated in your band plan in your area for radio to radio without a repeater communications, and that's called simplex. So you're going to want to find out what are your simplex frequencies. I would make sure that you have all of those simplex frequencies plugged into your handy talkie. Okay, just a piece of advice there.
And usually, like, we have what we call calling frequencies. So like on the 2 meter band, 146.52 megahertz, that is the standard frequency across the country. If you were to play APRS, which go Google it, it's pretty cool. Most of the guys use it as like trackers in their vehicles. If you were to go to APRS and search my call sign, you'd see where my truck is. Some people may go, oh, I don't want that. That's invasion of my privacy. The reason I did it is because I got tired of my wife calling me going, where are you at? Just go look me up on APRS, woman. You know, so, but APRS is 14439 across the country. 145.800 is the frequency for the International Space Station. Yes, there is ham radio on the ISS. I tried to work them on our field day a couple of weekends ago, but as it turns out, they shut the ham radio off about 9 a.m. Central, and I didn't try until about 12:30, so I just totally missed them. But there are standard frequencies, 446.000 if you're up in the UHF band. There are standard frequencies across the country. Like if I'm out on the interstate, I'll tune into like 146.52 because I was coming back from California one time, moving my buddy, and I saw up ahead there was some traffic, and so I put my call sign out on 146.52. And this guy come back and said, yeah, you know, it's all jammed up. We don't know what's going on. And some guy ahead of him says, oh, they're diverting everybody off at exit 1, off Interstate 10. And we're like, what's going on? And well, as I'm still sitting in traffic, inching forward, guy comes back and says, oh, I went in and talked to one of the officers at the rest stop there at exit 1. Somebody tried to do a suicide by semi from Quartzite going westbound on the eastbound lanes, and he succeeded. So they had all of I-10 eastbound shut down. So at least, you know, I'm sitting still a couple of miles back from the state line, and I already knew what to expect coming up. So it is helpful. It is usable. Yes, Channel 19 on CB could do about the same thing. You know, just having the capability to listen and or interact is huge. When something's going on, you know, it's better than sitting there not knowing why is traffic backed up for 5 hours, you know, or something like that.
So last night I kind of gave you the idea of, you know, for example, very high frequency VHF is 30 megahertz to 300, UHF is 300 to basically 3,000 or 3 gigahertz. But then when you go down below that, HF is from 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz. Okay. When we talk about the commercial radio in your car that says AM, we're talking about 0.9 megahertz or 900 kilohertz up to about 1.7 megahertz, 1700 kilohertz. So, I mean, you're getting pretty low in the frequency spectrum when you're talking about AM radio.
Right. FM broadcast is 88 to 108. So that's in the VHF range. Television, over-the-air TV, is, I want to say it's around 50 megahertz up into the 600.
Yeah.
They took a bunch of TV channels away so that they could, after 9/11, to turn around and sell it to AT&T for the FirstNet service. But, you know, so, and different frequency bands work differently. So, you know, like the VHF stuff, your FM radio, TV, all my VHF and HF and anything higher, there's this layer in the atmosphere called the ionosphere. Well, VHF and up, from 50 megahertz and up, will shoot straight through it. It'll just go straight through. When you get down around 28 megahertz and lower, it'll actually bounce off, and that's what CBers call skip. And that's how we bounce signals around the world down in what we call HF, is it'll bounce off the ionosphere. That all depends, and there's some knowledge of all this that you need to learn. During the day, the ionosphere rises because the atmosphere heats up. At night, it drops. So that changes what your skip is going to be. Also, what day of the year, what season you're in. Summer's going to be even higher because it's hotter up here. You know, so there's a lot that you will learn once you get into it. But to me, it's just all I'm a geek. So
let's talk real quick about skip zone. So when you transmit, there's basically a ground wave that comes off your radio, and that's going to be kind of like what your FM radio stations are going to be, you know, where you can hear it. It's kind of a line of sight type of a thing. And the radio horizon is going to be about 32 miles, I think it is.
For a 6 foot person, line of sight is 26 miles.
And then, but it's going to bend a little bit. So you may
It bends a little further
like
for radio.
32
It's
or
called the
somewhere
radio
around there.
horizon. Yeah.
But if you also have that sky wave that's going to go up and it's going to bounce back down. And so that sky wave comes down to the earth. Maybe that's 100 miles away. So now between 30 and 100, you have what's called the dead zone. You can pick it up, the ground wave, out to 30 miles away. Then you pick up the sky wave 100 miles away. But in between is a dead zone. If you're trying to communicate with somebody in that dead zone, you can purposefully aim your antenna to that, and it's called an NVIS, near vertical incident skywave. Do you want to explain that for us, Jim?
Sure. So the way the radio waves in your antennas work, normally we want our antennas about a half wavelength high, and your wavelength gets longer as your frequency goes down, because you have one point and your wave passes. Well, if you have a higher frequency of waves coming by, that's a higher frequency, you have a shorter wavelength. So if you're a half wave high with your antenna, your signal is going to go straight out, okay? And I'm going to back up for this. This will be a good thing. So if I'm at a half wave, my signal goes out like my arms. Well, as I go down, my signal starts to go up, which means you're getting a higher bounce. And instead of reflecting out and bouncing around the world, you're bouncing high and coming right back down. So if I was working a hurricane in Houston and I needed to talk back to the State Operations Center in Austin, you're only talking, 200 miles or so. Instead of putting my antenna at a half wave high, I actually want to have it down low to the ground, because that shoots my signal straight up and then right back down, so that we get the NVIS bounce. And on frequencies that normally I'd never be able to even hear somebody else from Texas on at a half wavelength high, I bring it down. I can talk from Houston to Austin, no problem.
So the whole idea here is a little bit of reflectivity too.
Right.
So you're using the ground kind of as a reflector, reflecting it upwards.
Right.
That is also an answer for something that Kaylin asked last night, and that was, how effective is having an antenna outside my window in an apartment complex? So the answer there is it only has about a 180-degree span that you're going to see, because it's going to be blocked by the building you're in.
Well, it depends on what band you're trying to talk on, what kind of antenna you're using. Are you allowed to, maybe there's woods behind your house, and there's behind the apartment. Can you tie off to the rail and throw the wire over into a tree to get like a long wire? There's a lot of possibilities. It would depend on what your apartment building allows. Some buildings won't even allow a simple, standard commercial antenna mounted to the railing. It all depends. If you just wanted to talk locally on local repeaters, you can. My first antenna, when I got my radio license, I took some Cat5 network cable and I stripped out the conductors and I cut them to the right length, and I had some other coax cable it was old networking coax from the old days. Yes, you can see I'm old. That had the connector that actually fit onto my first HT. And so I just had these two pieces of wire tied in the middle, and I hung that outside, and that was a vertical dipole. And with that, I was able to work all the local repeaters. They can be simple. They don't have, you can spend as much money as you want to, but you can also get away cheap. The first couple of years I was in ham radio, I had to spend over a couple of $100. So
we are down to the last 5 minutes of this hour-long live, and I would like to leave that open for questions, particular questions you have. For example, if you want to know what the best radio is, or if you have any specific questions like that, please put them in, because I noticed a lot of you are saying that it's technically way beyond your abilities. We are, and I'm trying to help you. I understand that everything has its own terminology, and so we have a tendency at times to forget. Terminology becomes kind of native to us, and And so we forget that we're speaking a foreign language to people who are uninitiated in that language. So that's why I said, instead of NVIS, I said Near Vertical Incident Skywave, trying to expand some of these acronyms for you. But I know we've lost a couple of you because you aren't into the technology or into the electrical engineering stuff, and I can appreciate that. I am with you. I'm a Russian linguist, not a signals guy, okay? I just happen to operate a radio to listen to the Russians. And oh, by the way, NSA did not send me to 3 years of language school to listen to you. Just I want to put that out there, okay? So anyhow, are there any questions that you all have out there that Jim can answer in the last 5 minutes here?
Now, is there supposed to be some chat room that I see? All I see is a private chat and it's empty. This is my first time on this platform, so...
Okay, so there should be a button up top that says comments, upper right.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, click on comments.
There they are. Okay.
Okay, so it's cheap, it's effective. Baofeng UV5. It probably will be your handy talkie that you're going to want to look at with the technical license. That's the one that's going to be based off of repeaters. I would say a GMRS or FRS radio, a CB radio, an HF receiver, whether it be either one of these two, either emergency or the 12 band.
If you have internet access, I know when things hit the fan, but if you have internet access, there actually are websites out there that are hams like me. They have what's called SDR, software defined radio. It is, I'm trying to find it here real quick. If I can find it, it should be right here in my drawer, and it's not. Basically, it's a USB stick, about like this, roughly. And you hook an antenna to it, and it's software-defined radio. There are websites out there. You can actually go onto their website, and you put in some name or call sign or whatever, and you can tune up all the different bands that they have. They'll say which bands they have antennas for, and you can actually sit there and listen around the world. There are sites around the world doing this, just FYI.
So there's a question for you, Jim. Would one of those antennas help with phone signals if you're in a remote area with little signal?
Yes. So I had a friend up in East Texas. He was building some stuff out on his 200-acre property, and he was a stock trader. He needed to be on his phone a lot, and his carrier had very weak signal. I went out. I noticed. I went up on the roof of his. He had one single wide mobile home out there temporarily. We were staying in while we were doing work. I looked at night. I could see the flashing lights of the tower off to the northeast. And so the next weekend when I went up there, I brought a push-up pole, a telescopic pole. I brought a antenna. It was a beam antenna, it has multiple elements on it. I don't have one handy, but anyway, it's called a beam. It's a directional antenna, and some good hardline, not some weak, cheap, small coax, but some good, because when you go high in frequency, you lose a lot more signal in your feed line. I ran some hardline up. It was the tail wagging the dog with that hardline hooking to his little router thing that was hooked. It had a 4G card in it. We hooked all that up. Standing there on the roof, I was getting barely a half a bar. After I hooked up this antenna down to his little router thing, we had 3 bars, and he had real good, 4G connection. So yes, and if you get a good antenna and good feed line and the adapters, you can. And they also have, basically, it's an antenna you put on the roof, comes down, and then it's basically its own little cell site that then retransmits the cell signals into your building. We set up one of those in a building that was sheathed in granite. Nobody had cell phone signal in this office building. That is a Yagi, yeah. So that's kind of a beam antenna. Anyway, if you were looking just for cell phone stuff, you can put the antenna on the roof down to this little amplifier retransmitter that then retransmits. Your phone sees a cell signal, but it's the little box in your ceiling that then reconnects on the antenna to the tower farther away. there's ways to play with everything.
So you're absolutely right, Laura. So the way I met Jim is two ways. Number one, Williamson County Ham Club, and number two is through ARES. So that's the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. So,
Of which I am I am one of the board. I'm on the board of directors for the Williamson County ARES. It's Williamson County, Texas. Sorry, that's my APRS going off. Williamson County, Texas. If you were to go to wc-ares.org, that's Williamson County, Texas. If you did it without the dash, wcares.org, you'd hit Williamson County, Tennessee. Maybe that'll help you if you're over in Tennessee. We know them. We know the guys in Tennessee because we talk to them over HF.
So yeah, check out your local ham radio club. Everybody there is.
Yep.
I go to breakfast with a group of the guys at 6:00 every Saturday morning. Can you believe we get together at 6 a.m. to drink coffee and have breakfast and talk about hams? But anyhow, so yeah, there's a great group of people. I have a guy, Mike, that's just phenomenal. Alan, I sat with him during the Hamfest and during the contest, and that was a lot of fun. So yeah.
I'm looking at the questions. I see one. I ain't even gonna try to pronounce it. It says probably not a real big one, but most basic base stations don't pull a lot of power, but ask me about wattage. So, like my main radio here, you know what, I'm gonna get my camera. Oh, it ain't gonna fit. I'm sorry. My main radio here, when it's turned up all the way on HF, I can put out 100 watts, and it'll pull that much too. And speaking of people who take 3 times to take their test.
No, I'm not going on there.
Okay, she's not going to show up. I was going to prove to you she's blonde. Okay, so that's why it took her 3 times.
But she is attractive.
Okay, I've seen her for 21 years, you know. And again, I'm not worried. I know she doesn't hit hard, and her aim is horrible. She just broke something walking out of my office. Anyway, back to the radio. So it'll put off 100 watts, but you can turn it down. In fact, the FCC rules is you will use the minimum amount of power needed to make your communication. So if I'm talking to Lee and we're close enough, I shouldn't be running 50 watts. You know, 5 watts will suffice. That's what we should be doing. That is the rule of you always run the minimum amount of power you need. I know a certain guy, he was running Morse code, and Morse code, because it's a very small signal, you don't need a lot of power to begin with. Well, he kept putting attenuators and knocking his signal down and turning everything down as much as he could. He was messaging with a guy in Maine from Georgetown, Texas, and he put in every attenuator he had. He cut it down as much as he could, and it turned, I forget what, it was like milliwatts that he was putting out, and they were still making the connection. He got some award for it because the other guy put him in for the award saying, you know, yes, I heard him on this very low power, which we call anything under 100 watts, they call QRP, which is very low power. We use Q codes a lot. Like the cops use 10.4 and 10.8 and all that. Us hams, we use the Q codes. So there's a bunch of them.
And numbers like 73s.
7.3 is wishing somebody goodwill. Those numbers came up in the old Morse code message traffic passing days. And so they could just put 2 numbers instead of like a whole string of words. So 7.3 basically means I'm wishing you well, best wishes. So people call them good numbers.
Well, y'all, we are at 1 hour and 5 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Thank you, Jim, for your time this evening. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Huh? Set my Baofangs up and blocked me from talking. Okay, that's Laura? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so I guess we're over time.
Yeah, he probably had them set up to where he only plugged in the receive freak on the repeater instead of the transmit.
Could be.
So,
or one of my ham buddies, he got a new HT. He programmed it all up. We're out there during an event. He'd key up. It wouldn't hit the repeater. Not only did he have to turn the PL tone on, which signals the transmitter at the repeater to turn on, not only did he set the repeater tone frequency, he forgot to turn the tone on or enable it. And once he fixed that, then everything worked fine. So there's always little things, depending on the radios, that you got to kind of figure out. Read the manual.
So
Or
shenanigans, yes, an antenna on your roof would be helpful in reaching a cell phone tower, extending the reach of your tower.
I actually have a bumper sticker. Anytime you get a radio, use this. Read the manual.
Let me see. Okay, so yes, today is Prime Day. There are 2 radios that are on sale right now on Ham Prime Day. I'm sorry, on Amazon Prime Days. So just go ahead and look up Prime, and if you want to get a radio, now is the time to do it. There are a couple good ones there. I noticed that they have an ICOM, which is, I think it's an 8-band transceiver for $1,200, and they're allowing you to put that out over 12 months at $100 a month. So if you really want this ICOM transceiver for HF, then that's down to $1,200 for Prime Days. So thank you all so much for being here. We enjoyed it. Thank you, Jim, for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
I'm glad. Anytime you want me back, I'll be glad to come back. I'm sorry I missed last night. We had our Lone Star Storm Spotters Network weekly net, which is lssn.us. If you want to go look it up, it's where we do storm spotting, not chasing, but spotting. It was started by chasers, but we don't chase, not yet. Once the kids are grown up and out of the house, me and the wife are going to go chase. But we had a net, and after the net, I just totally spaced it and walked out of here. And this morning when I saw Lee's email, I felt horrible. So I said, okay, if you want me to come back tonight, I'd be glad to. And I'd be glad to come back any other time you want. I'll just make sure to put an alarm in my phone to remind me.
Okay. So with that, thank you all for being here. Communications are going to be critical in a post-apocalyptic world. So, start thinking now. Get a hold of a ham. Get a hold of a local ham club. Find out if there's a GMRS license that you can hatch onto in your local area. I would say start out at least with the CB radio and get familiar with that. And that should help you get going.
If you've never been on CB, sometimes they don't follow all the rules, and you might not want your kids being around to listen to it. Just FYI, not all the time, but there are some people who get on CB and they're not family friendly, shall we say.
Sounds good. Okay, so the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 24, 25, 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. Next week we'll be back. And next week, let me see, it's going to be chapter 10. And chapter 10 is home security and self-defense. So we'll be talking home security and self-defense next weekend. So thank you all for being here. Remember that we're all in this together so we can come out the other side together. Thank you so much for being kind, polite, and respectful to each other. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being kind, polite, and respectful to each other, because that means so much to us, because togetherness is the only way we're going to get through this. Take care, everybody. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
By the way, Lee, you see my shirt, right?
Yep.
Say about self-defense.
You like mine?
Mine on the back. Shall not be infringed.
Yeah, mine says we the people are kind of ticked off.
So this was just my bucket of 300.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.